Your brain is constantly negotiating with your standards, not the big dramatic ones you announce to other people, the quiet ones, the private expectations you have for your life. Because every time reality starts drifting away from the life you imagined, your brain faces a difficult choice: change your behavior or lower the expectation. And the second option is almost always easier. So slowly, without announcing it, the standards begin to move. Think about the expectations you once had for your life, the things you believe you would eventually achieve, the habits you were certain you would maintain, the kind of discipline you imagined becoming normal. At some point, those expectations probably felt very real, very possible. But as time passed, something subtle may have started happening. Not a dramatic collapse, but small adjustments. Maybe the goal became less important, maybe the timeline quietly extended, maybe the effort required suddenly felt unrealistic. And eventually something interesting happens. The version of life that once felt unacceptable slowly becomes normal. When people notice this shift, they usually explain it in very reasonable ways. They say they become more realistic, more balanced, more practical. And sometimes that's true. Life does require adaptation, but there is another psychological force operating quietly underneath those explanations. The brain has a powerful instinct to protect emotional comfort, and high standards can create a lot of emotional pressure. Pressure to perform, pressure to improve, pressure to confront where your life currently stands. Lowering the standards removes that pressure instantly, and that relief feels incredibly attractive. Psychologists sometimes describe this process as standard drift. When reality and expectations begin to separate, the mind slowly adjusts the expectation until the discomfort disappears. At first, the adjustment is small. A skipped workout becomes a rest day. A missed deadline becomes not the right timing. A postponed goal becomes something to revisit later. None of these changes feel dramatic. Each one seems reasonable on its own. But over time, the direction becomes clear. The bar slowly moves downward. Not because the goal was impossible, but because lowering the standard removes the uncomfortable tension between who you are and who you expected yourself to become. The moment most people never notice is when the adjustment becomes permanent. The standard doesn't just move temporarily, it becomes the new normal. What once felt like falling short now feels acceptable, even ordinary. And this shift happens so gradually that it rarely feels like a decision. It feels like life simply unfolded this way. But if you compare your current expectations with the ones you held years earlier, the difference can be surprising. Not because you became incapable, but because the brain slowly negotiated your ambitions downward. Modern environments make this drift even easier because almost everyone around us is quietly adjusting their standards too. People normalize habits they once criticized. Goals that once felt essential became optional. Ambition slowly turns into comfort. When everyone around you is lowering the bar slightly, the change becomes almost invisible. The environment quietly confirms the new standard. And once the lower expectation becomes socially normal, the brain stops questioning it. Here's the difficult truth. Many people do not fall short of their potential because they lack ability. They fall short because their standards slowly adapted to their comfort zone. The mind becomes extremely skilled at making those adjustments feel logical. Logical enough that the person never notices the shift. Years later, they may look at their life and feel a vague sense that something is missing, a quiet awareness that the life they imagined never fully appeared. But by that point, the lowered standard has been normal for so long, it feels almost impossible to trace when the change happened. Escaping this pattern begins with a simple but uncomfortable observation. Standards do not collapse suddenly, they drift, which means the solution is not dramatic motivation, it is awareness. The ability to notice when expectations are quietly shrinking, when compromises slowly become permanent habits, when short-term comfort begins rewriting long-term ambitions. People who maintain high standards are not immune to this process. They simply cut the drift earlier, before the adjustment becomes permanent. High standards are not about perfection, they are about direction. They act like a compass that keeps your life oriented toward growth. Without that compass, the brain naturally steers toward comfort. And comfort rarely demands improvement. Maintaining a meaningful standard doesn't mean you will never struggle. It means the direction remains clear even during difficult periods. The bar stays visible, even when progress toward it feels slow. Your brain will always try to negotiate with a standard, because lowering the bar removes pressure. It makes the present feel easier. But the cost of that comfort appears slowly, one small adjustment at a time, until the life you once imagined is no longer the life you expect. And the strange thing is this: the difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one is rarely talent. It is the quiet decision to stop lowering the standard.